A tuner monster is a type of monster in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's required in order to go into synchro monsters, where you simply add the levels of the tuner and non-tuner materials to equal whatever level of synchro monster you're trying to bring out. So, at number 10 on our worst of list of these kinds of monsters, we have Blackwing, Kochi the Daybreak. This is a level 4 Blackwing tuner monster, which has the effect that if this card is special summoned, it cannot be used as a synchro material. So basically, it has low stats and only a negative effect, so it's a great card to start this list off on, because it actually saw more competitive play than every other card on this list. You see, this card came out in the early days of synchro summoning, and they used to be very against allowing level 4 tuner monsters to exist. Back then, the level 8 synchro monsters were some of the best synchro monsters you can go into, with cards like Stardust Dragon being a staple boss monster in the early synchro format. And since the highest level of monster you can bring out without a tribute is 4, being able to get out 2 level 4 monsters to go into a level 8 synchro monster was thought of as a beneficial condition. So they just straight up would not make level 4 tuner monsters unless they had some kind of ridiculous downside to them, like Trap Eater and its ability to only come out if you destroyed one of your opponent's face-up trap cards. So this is the framing for Daybreak and its purely negative effect, because in its deck of Blackwings, they have cards that allow you to search this card out pretty easily with Blackwing Whirlwind, and there were other Blackwing monsters who could special summon themselves from the hand if you simply controlled a Blackwing monster, like Blackwing Boar the Spear or Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind. So the intended use of Daybreak was to have it use up your normal summon, and then use one of the other Blackwing monsters that could special summon themselves from the hand in order to go into synchro plays, and it saw some competitive play because of that, and the fact that Blackwing saw a lot of competitive play at the time. Not all Blackwing decks use this card though. It was definitely not a staple, but it was the ever elusive level 4 tuner monster, which might be useful. Eventually, Konami stopped worrying about level 4 tuner monsters breaking the game, and now we have excellent cards like Raiden Hand of the Lightsworn, a level 4 tuner monster which is one of the best Lightsworn monsters, or Windwitch Glassbell, who can be brought out directly from the deck with its level 3 counterpart, and can even surge out another card when it's brought out. So even though Daybreak is terrible by today's standard, it is an interesting look back at early synchro cards, and how strong they thought a level 4 tuner would be at the time. And at number 9, we have Flamvell Archer. This is a level 3 tuner monster with 1000 attack that has the effect where once per turn you contribute a pyro-type monster you control to give all your Flamvell monsters 800 extra attack until the end phase. And since this card can tribute itself, if you wanted to waste your normal summon and bring this card out, you could give a boost to all your other low attack Flamvell monsters, since they're not really known for having high attack point values. Basically, cards which only have the effect to grant attack on the field are kind of useless, because that doesn't really impact the field very much unless the ability does something else. Especially made even worse when you have one of the harshest costs associated to that attack boost, being the requirement of a tribute of a monster. And an 800 attack boost isn't even that good. This card might be more useful if you could use the effect from the hand, but it was kind of one of the worst combinations of effects and costs for a pretty mediocre attack boost on the field. However, this card does have one good thing going for it. It's a fire attribute monster with 200 defense exactly, which means it's a target for Rekindling, a spell card that allows you to special summon as many fire monsters with exactly 200 defense as possible from your graveyard, but they're banished during the end phase. And since Flamvell Archer is a tuner, which is a benefit of the card, that made it a decent target for Rekindling. And so Flamvell Archer actually saw play in a couple of Lightsworn Flamvell decks, purely because of its stats and tuner status, and at least doesn't have a negative effect, like Blackwing Kochi the Daybreak, so it could be used for synchro plays when it was immediately special summoned. So technically a bad card, but useful with Rekindling, so only number 9 on this list. And at number 8, we have Gusto Falco. This is a level 2 tuner which has the effect that, when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard except by battle, you can special summon any Gusto monster from your deck face down. So on surface level, this sounds pretty good. If it's sent to the graveyard from the field in basically any non-battle way, you get to replace it with another Gusto from the deck, and special summoning monsters from your deck is really good. Especially since this card is a tuner monster and can be sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon to activate its effect. Here's the thing though, trying to activate its effect in that way would cause the effect to miss timing. If you use this card for a synchro summon, the last thing that happens would be the summon of that monster, so you wouldn't be able to use its effect to special summon any Gusto from your deck. Because for some reason, nearly the entire Gusto archetype is full of when floating effects instead of if. And when effects miss timing very easily. Unless that's the last thing that happens, it's going to miss the activation window. So if this card is destroyed in a chain, like if you activate an effect, and then your opponent chains a Regeki break to this card, it would cause it to miss timing because it would happen mid-chain, and wouldn't be the last thing that happened on the field. If you tried to destroy this card in a creative way in order to gain a benefit, you'd have to make sure those effects happen simultaneously, otherwise it would just miss timing. And there's very few cards that destroy and activate their effects simultaneously, like maybe Kiraz the Light Monarch. If this card simply had an if effect rather than when, it wouldn't be on this list. But most of the other Gusto monsters also miss timing very easily, but at least they can activate their floating effects when destroyed by battle, like Gusto Guldo, another tuner Gusto monster which can miss timing, but it can at least activate its floating effect when it's destroyed by battle. And at number 7, we have Wattbetta. This is a level 2 Watt tuner monster, which has the effect that, if it inflicts battle damage by a direct attack, your opponent can discard one card of their choice from their hand. It only has 100 attack and can't attack directly under its own power, like a lot of the other Watt monsters, and can't special summon itself, so you have to expend resources to get this card on the field. There is a level 3 Watt monster, which is also bad, called Wattbetta, which has a similar effects. If it inflicts battle damage by direct attack, you get to discard one random card from your opponent's hand. Although Wattbetta allows you to discard a random card instead of one of their choice, which is why Wattbetta makes this list over all the other Bat Watt tuner monsters. It's just a slightly worse. Also has incredibly low stats. Even if the effect to discard a card from your opponent's hand is technically good. This is kind of one of the worst ways to go about it. Unless you really want to combo this card with something like Watt Key to allow all your Watt monsters to attack directly that turn. And at number 6, we have Svartalf of the Nordic Alfar. This is a level 5 tuner monster, which means it requires a tribute summon to be brought on the field, and most of the good level 5 or higher tuner monsters have some special way to bring them out, like Quick Draw Synchron and its ability to special summon itself from the hand. This one really doesn't have support for bringing itself out, but if you do tribute summon this card and bring it out with a normal summon, you get to add a Nordic monster from your graveyard to your hand. So, a +1 in advantage with recursion from the graveyard. Not half bad, if it wasn't for the fact that this is a completely useless effect tied to a high-level tuner monster. Especially in the Nordic archetype, which is already kinda bad. Quite possibly one of the top 10 worst archetypes in the game. They did release some new support recently in the past couple of years to make them a little bit less bad, and they do have a new card like Alvis of the Nordic Alfar, which could possibly special summon it from the deck if banished by their Link monster, so it could have some use in bringing out its boss monster, Loki, Lord of the Aesir, but not because Svartalf does anything good on its own. And at number 5, we have Blackwing, Mistral the Silver Shield. This is a level 2 Blackwing tuner, which has the effect that, if this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, the next battle damage you would take this turn becomes 0. Now, this is a pretty unique effect. I'm not sure there's another card in the game which specifically adds a lingering effect to the field, which will reduce the next battle damage you take. But it's not a very good effect either. Basically, if you bring this card out and it gets destroyed mid-combo, then nothing happens since the effect doesn't carry over to your next turn. Basically, the intended use of this is to be destroyed during your opponent's turn to stop some battle damage, but Blackwings aren't really about bringing out low-level tuners to act as walls. They're more combo-oriented. That is to say, the effect is kind of useless in its archetype, but technically a positive effect nonetheless. Just kind of a really weak one, not really befitting a tuner monster. Although even though this card doesn't have a straight-up negative effect like Blackwing Kochi the Daybreak, this should show you something about how more useful level 4 tuner monsters are, if Daybreak has seen more competitive play than Mistral the Silver Shield, despite the fact that Blackwing Mistral the Silver Shield also benefits from Blackwing support, and doesn't have a negative effect tied to it. It's just incredibly mediocre, which is enough for it to make the worst of list. And at number 4, we have Sinister Sprocket. This is a level 1 monster that at least has synchro related effects, where if this card is sent to the graveyard for the synchro summon of a dark synchro monster, you can destroy one face-up spell or trap card. And being able to destroy face-up spell or trap cards is a good effect, as the card Twister saw a lot of competitive play over the years, and all it does is allow you to destroy a single face-up spell or trap card. Although the reason Twister saw play and Sinister Sprocket didn't is because Twister doesn't require you to jump through hoops or perform a synchro summon to use it, and of course was a lot more versatile, being a quick play spell card that could be used immediately and during your opponent's turn, while also being an excellent side deck addition that could fit into pretty much any deck. Whereas Sinister Sprocket is very specific in its uses. It basically has a side deck only useful good effect, while also being hard to use, which is why the card never saw play, and why it's kind of a bad card despite having a technically positive effect, like Blackwing, Mistral, the Silver Shield. And at number 3, we have Dark Tinker. This is a level 2 tuner monster which has the effect that if it's sent to the graveyard, you can look at the top card of your deck, and you can return that card to the top or bottom of the deck. Now, unlike Gusto Falco, this card does not miss timing despite the fact that it's a win effect, because the effect is mandatory and not optional, so you can activate its effect if sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon. The only problem with this effect is that it's very mediocre, and not beneficial to a lot of decks. Most decks don't care what the top card of their deck is, and the few decks that do like to see what the top card of their deck is, like maybe Reversal Quiz OTK decks, wouldn't use a card like this in order to stack the top of their deck. But I don't think this was the purpose of the card, to actually fit into a type of deck that can actually make use of its effect to gain information on the top card of your deck. I'm sure its intended use was to just maybe look at the top card of your deck, and if it's not something you want in your hand on your next turn, you could just send it to the bottom of the deck in order to maybe try again with a random draw. So if we were to have a list on some of the absolute most minor, technically positive effects, this is definitely one of them. Gaining information on the top of your deck is not that big a deal. And since Dark Tinker doesn't really do anything else, I'm not even sure it really has much synergy outside of maybe Fables, or maybe the Maleferous 3-card archetype. So it's probably just pack filler that was meant to be an option if you really needed a level 2 Dark Fiend tuner monster. It might get used for its stats, but definitely not for its effect. And at number 2, we have Iron Chain Coil. This is a level 3 tuner monster, which has the effect that once per turn you can select one Iron Chain monster you control, and that monster gains 300 attack and defense as long as this card remains face up on the field. However, seeing as this is the only tuner monster in the Iron Chain archetype, and tuners kind of have to leave the field if they're used as a synchro material, its effect doesn't really make sense. Its stats are incredibly low for a monster that has to stay around in order to buff up someone else by such a minor amount. 300 is not worth it. That it's kind of a wonder what they were thinking with this card. The funny thing is, the Iron Chain archetype does have a good card in it, Iron Chain Repairman, which once per turn can special summon an Iron Chain monster from the graveyard. So if you used Iron Chain Repairman in order to bring out Iron Chain Coil, they would not be able to go into their only synchro monster, Iron Chain Dragon, because it's a level 6 monster, and Repairman and Coil add up to 7. They could still just go into a level 7 synchro monster, and that would be fine, but it's really funny that the only Iron Chain monster that can special summon other Iron Chain monsters, and the only Iron Chain tuner monster, can't actually combo to go into their synchro monster. And also Iron Chain Coil just has the worst effect of them all, which is kind of hard to beat since Iron Chain Blaster and Iron Chain Snake don't have good effects either. A 300 attack boost is just so minor that if instead it could give a boost to everyone on your side of the field permanently, it still wouldn't be very good. But the fact that it needs to stay on the field to maintain that boost just makes it garbage tier, especially since it only works on other Iron Chain monsters. The only good card you'd want to use this on is their synchro monster, which this card is ironically not good at bringing out. And at number 1, we have Majestic Dragon. This is a level 1 tuner monster with no stats and only a negative effect, where this card cannot be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of a Majestic monster. When this card came out, there were only 2 Majestic synchro monsters who both required this card as one of its tuners, as well as a specific level 8 synchro monster, Stardust Dragon and Red Dragon Archfiend, plus one more level 1 non-tuner monster. So you had to have 2 specific monsters in the field plus an additional level 1 in order to bring out Majestic Red Dragon or Majestic Star Dragon. And because of this strict summoning condition, and the fact that Majestic Dragon was so bad, these 2 synchro monsters were some of the worst synchro monsters in the game, based purely on summoning condition. Their effects aren't half bad, they were just like impossible to bring out. In fact, Majestic Dragon is so bad that they're basically making a replacement for the card called Wish Converging Dragon, which is a level 1 tuner monster that can special summon itself from the hand when you draw into it, and can treat its name as Majestic Dragon while in the field or in the graveyard. And also, if you control a level 8 or higher dragon synchro monster when it special summons itself, you can also special summon a level 1 dragon monster from your deck. So, the retrain Wish Converging Dragon can actually allow you to fulfill the conditions for bringing out Majestic Red Dragon or Majestic Star Dragon way easier than the original Majestic Dragon ever could, who only has negative effects. Which is why I think Majestic Dragon is probably the worst tuner monster in the game. Most of the other ones on this list technically had beneficial effects, except for Blackwing, Kochi, the Daybreak. But at least Daybreak benefited from the plethora of Blackwing support. Whereas Majestic Dragon didn't really have that problem, so its negative effects weren't really warranted at all. Alright, and that's the list. Were there any other worst tuner monsters that should have made this list? Have any ideas for videos similar to this one? If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments, especially worst of ideas. Also, fun fact, I now also have a playlist going over all of my worst of top 10s, which will be linked at the end of the video right now.